All right. Hi, everybody. It's me, Raven, the AS Films Coordinator, and I'm here today with Josh and Avielle from Bellingham Film. So I'm just going to get started by letting them introduce themselves. Avielle, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Avielle Heath. I'm the founder of Bellingham Film, and I'm also a local film producer.
Awesome. And Josh?
Hi, I'm Josh Krenz. I run Bellingham Film Script Studio, and when it happens, our script to screen program. I am a local writer and filmmaker.
Awesome. So the first thing I wanted to start with is I just wanted to hear from you guys how you describe Bellingham Film as an organization and like what role are you trying to fill in the film community here with Bellingham Film?
Great question. Josh, do you want to I'd love to hear your take on it just because you weren't really there in the very, very beginning.
I know, it's true.
Right?
Or so you can correct me after the fact. That's how he discusses it. I see Bellingham Film. I mean, I do see it as kind of like a hub within the community or within the film community. My role has a tendency to be around a lot of community events, and certainly for people who are looking to build or develop or even kind of exhibit some of their skills. Whereas I think Avielle has a little bit more of like the local production connection, and so that defines, I think, her role and her dynamic. But as I see it, what Bellingham Film's job, or at least what we try to do, is facilitate both film education and awareness and production within our community. And if that means make services available for professionals, we do what we can to support that. If it's about helping amateurs or people who are developing skills still get access to resources, then we want to be there to do that as well.
Yeah, I think Bellingham Film is here to be a resource to help grow the community in whatever capacity that means. When Bellingham Film first started, it was just supposed to be an information hub for film festivals. And as the film community grew and the needs changed, we adapted and changed and turned into Bellingham Film and are now more production oriented. So we're here to help the film community and grow with the community.
That's a much better answer than mine.
That was
more concise as well.
Answer. But also, Josh, you mentioned in your intro script studio and script to screen. Do you want to just describe a little bit more about what those are?
Yeah. So in pre-COVID world, Script Studio was a monthly meeting that was open to anyone within our community who was interested in sharing work or just, bearing witness or participating in what people are writing and ideally putting into development or trying to create and put out into the world. So the Script Studio would do a rotating kind of like a rotating series of 3 local screenplays. We'd do 15 pages from each writer. And it would be a live reading where you'd cast it from, attendees. And then there would be an opportunity for the writer to receive some feedback and just kind of understand what the audience's reaction to what was there and what is on the page. So when it's safe to kind of get back together in groups again, we're looking forward to getting back into that cadence. But it's a pretty solid community that's made up of really experienced writers and people of all skill levels. So we just, again, it's about building that community and making those resources available. Our other programs like script to screen, those are, as Avielle mentioned, a little bit more production focused. And again, that has to do with, like, I kind of stole this from the Bellingham Theater Guild, but I felt like it was an opportunity to create like a production experience for people who were interested in production experiences and learning and building those skills, where the byproduct is that we've made a short film by the end of it. And in doing so, we tried to bring together local professionals to serve as mentors, and a whole array of kind of mentees who will take actual, responsibility for jobs and tasks throughout the entire development, pre-production, principal, and post of this short film. So, but again, I see it as, the goal for that is just really giving people production skills so that they can, know what they are doing when they go out to make something on their own.
Yeah, I mean, script to screen was very valuable for me when I did it in my freshman year. I definitely would not have been able to go out and do some of the projects I did. So Avielle, you mentioned
Glad we didn't put you through the ringer.
Oh, it was fun though. It was good for me to have that experience where we were just like working all night long in the cold in the middle of winter. Because after I did that, I was like, well, everything else is easy.
Well, I hope that's not like the only experience that you take from that, but
no, definitely not. There were also many fun moments. A lot of bonding moments. So, Avielle, you talked a little bit about when Bellingham Film first got started, and it sounds like it has changed a lot as an organization. So, how did it first get started, and how has that kind of evolved over time?
Well, it started off with a grant writing class that I had at Western. And for the class, we had to create something. And I was doing my film journey at that point, doing what I would say, not the greatest short films where you're just learning about everything, how cameras work, how to set up your lighting, how to communicate, how to create call sheets, all those kinds of things. And I started to realize that Bellingham Film had a slightly larger film community than I thought. We had lots of festivals that were happening. There were a few small production companies. So I decided to take all the information that I was collecting and create a website so people would know what to do with that short film once they have it. So it had festival information, submission deadlines, all of those kinds of things. And to launch the website, we actually created Bellingham. So that was the big festival that launched what was Bellingham Film Festivals at the time. And then from there, we started doing showcases, mixers, and then we started transitioning and seeing more and more filmmakers show up to our events. And we started to understand that we have other needs other than just information about film festivals. So from there, we started getting industry professionals to come in and speak at mixers so we can learn a little bit more about the craft. And then that progressed into creating more programs like script to screen and making sure that we can be not necessarily a standard, but an opportunity for filmmakers that want to get into the industry professionally to have a resource where they can ask those questions, where they can get some of that training, where they can be directed to different production companies that might be willing to take on interns or hire folks as PAs to get experience. So we just adapt and grow and see what's next.
And Josh, how did you get involved with Bellingham Film?
Yeah. My wife and I moved to Bellingham to start our family, and we had a baby, and I didn't know anyone. And I was driving her, my wife crazy. And she said, you need to get out and you need to meet people and you need to do things. And she said, there's this screenwriting group. That's your background, that's your passion, that's your interest. You should be part of this. It's like, I don't know, meet people. I don't know, it's this thing. So I went and, just immediately clicked. Natalie Fadak was the mentor at that time, and she's still involved in our community and still a prolific writer. And She, after a few months, she was like, I'm going to go do a world tour and I need someone to take over. Would you be interested? And I said, I guess so. Guess so. And
It'll
kind of
make
from
my wife
there,
happy.
is that what?
But it'll make my wife happy.
Yeah, it'll make my wife happy. That's really, I mean, like that is, yeah, boy, was she wrong about, that commitment. But no, it just kind of evolved from there. And from that point, Avielle and I started talking about what other things could we do. We saw a big opportunity to kind of educate production skills and to try to do more. And we saw that there was a passion in this community and wanted to kind of tap into that when we could. So
Right. I think Josh was kind of that missing piece for Bellingham Film, because we had our festivals and our mixers where we would have people come and speak to large groups, but we didn't actually have any hands-on programs. And Josh was able to bring his experience and his expertise to help work with us so we could develop some of those opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know Bellingham Film has a lot of really great resources for people who are up and coming, just starting to learn about film. Are there any of those particular resources that you guys want to highlight that you would really recommend for aspiring filmmakers to check out?
It's a tough question right now during the pandemic because we're kind of
know.
on hold.
I know.
But I like to think our mixers are that first point of entry for filmmakers. It gives you a chance just to check out the community, see who's out there, get to know other people. From there, it just kind of depends on where your interest lies. I always encourage folks. A lot of what I do is when new filmmakers come to town, I'll sit down, have some coffee with them, go over what their goals are for their film community and what they want to see. And from there, I'll give them resources and people to contact to get them connected. Because I know it's a huge challenge in Bellingham, is trying to break through all the different cliques and groups and things. And one of the original goals of Bellingham Film was to break those barriers and get people to start talking and communicating. And from there, we've been able to do really large productions in Bellingham without having to source people from Seattle. And it's great to be able to see that level of professionalism just continues to keep going higher and higher as people are growing and learning and still maintaining Bellingham as their home address, which is.
Yeah, I mean, I think like one of the challenges is in the entertainment industry, you're pretty much feel pigeonholed to Los Angeles, New York, but we are close to Vancouver, which is a major production hub. And I think people sometimes forget that we have a fair amount of talent in this community. They may not always, work and do their productions in this community, but we definitely have people who want to be engaged and who are engaged and who have those skills. As to like directing people to resources right now, and where I think candidly, one of my primary goals when we started talking about something like script to screen was set safety and what I felt were practices that should be adhered to keep crew and cast and everything not just efficient and cost contained, but also safe. And one of the things that has really come to light for me over this past year of being at home is still trying to make sure that people are educated as to what's going on for safe production practices. And there are definitely resources that have been made available through the state, through Washington FilmWorks, about safe production practices during COVID. And I think those are going to influence some of our, some of our, I think, course direction in the future, and just thinking about some of those things. Did that sort of answer the question?
Yeah, no, definitely. And also, I guess when we do get to a point where people are starting to get on set again and in larger groups, you all have worked a lot with people who are on set for the very first time and they've never experienced it before. So do you have any advice for people who are going into their first kind of work on set?
Listen.
Yeah, I was just say, be a good listener.
Be a good listener. You can get information from all kinds of people just by being quiet and listening. And that'll sort of give you an understanding of what you should be doing, where you should be going without people having to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ask too many questions is another key one.
Mm-hmm.
But I always enjoy having new filmmakers on set because it's an amazing industry to be a part of, and you don't necessarily have to go to film school to get into film. If it's something that you're passionate about, you just need to show up and take in everything that you can on set and use that in your personal life with your own projects, because there's so much you can learn on different sets. I've been working with a core group of folks for probably the last 8 years or so, and those folks are my go-to, and I really love working with them. But I also make sure that I work with productions from people from New York and LA and other places, just so I can see how they run their projects and get a chance to experience something that might be on a larger scale or a smaller scale than what I'm used to. This fall, we did a project for Hall's Cough Drops here in town, and during COVID, and we had about 50 people on set. So getting a chance to experience what that's like and how you manage a production of that size was invaluable to me, because it's not something that I do often. I've done that a couple times out of state, but to do it in my own backyard with people I've never worked with before was an invaluable experience.
What she said. No, I think I remember being on professional sets when I was very, very young. I am not very young anymore. And I remember hearing a lot of PAs kind of get chastised with, there's a time and a place for this, there's a time and a place. And I remember a lot of PAs like lecturing other PAs about how they understood like Scorsese better than the professionals on the set, and because of that they should be having something lined up for them. But I think my general advice is much like Avielle said, it's listen and take advantage of the opportunity. The people that you work with are the people who get you your next job, and being available to them, being a facilitator and being willing to get things done, that matters a lot. Being
all
open.
of the work that I've done has been based off referrals.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely key in this industry to make sure that you don't burn bridges, and that you are respectful of the people around you and the places that you are.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. I mean, that's exactly right. So, and be safe, because there are people who, if you don't know, it's a good time to ask. There are not just because it's expensive film equipment and insurance is costly, but also, we don't want to endanger ourselves or other people with our decisions on set.
Right. I think that goes to with commercial type projects, it's different than doing features or short films, because they're just two separate beasts. And I think with commercial stuff, we have standards that we generally have to follow. But when you're looking at narrative, there's a lot more give. So you have to be really careful that when you're in that environment and you're asked to do something unsafe or something that you feel uncomfortable with, you need to speak up, and it's okay. So don't ever just go with the flow if it's something that makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to see any more shots of people like hanging out of cars just to get the cool driving shot. Like it's just not worth it. It's so not worth that shot. So.
Right. And if you want to get that shot safely, there are
ways. Yeah.
Well, there are ways, and there are folks here in town that will rent you the gear to do it safely.
Yes.
So what has been your guys' favorite experiences working with Bellingham Film?
the people. I
Yeah.
mean, I the first time we did script to screen, it was so amazing to me meeting people who had no film experience, but they had skills that could be, were like transferable to film skills, and just kind of watching that kind of blossom inside of them. It was phenomenal. I just love that. And I've met a lot of great people that I feel like, are part of my community now, and people I want to engage with and do projects with. So that's hands down why I do this.
Yeah, I think for me, it's getting an opportunity to see people in the beginning of their career and watching them sort of step into that professional side and start working on bigger productions for TVs and movies and commercials, and not just doing their own personal narrative stuff. So making sure that people can earn an income from their passion.
I think again, there's a bias towards the entertainment industry, but if you're willing to do corporate and commercial work, I mean, we're actually in a pretty good area for that. A couple of hours south, there are massive corporations that need content professionals that have these skills, whether it be to manage productions or to write for them or to go out and film and cut. So
right. And we're hopeful that our state will get better film incentives and we can encourage more TV productions and movies to come back to the state and do more work. But is, it's a work in progress. Lots of pieces that need to fall in place for that.
Yeah, I know Bellingham Film has been involved in kind of trying to advocate for more incentives for film in Washington. Do you guys want to talk a little bit more about what that's been like?
That's all Avielle.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's been a journey. We're in a certain situation where we've got BC just north of us, and they have an amazing film community there. Their incentives are better than anything that we can offer. And then you've got Portland, and their incentives again are better than we can offer. So we're sort of stuck between these two places that create better opportunities for outside companies to get kickbacks for bringing their productions there. And we've been trying to compete. We've been able to get our incentives increased a little bit, but by no means is it something that can even compete with Portland, let alone BC. So we're still stuck in that regards. But I'm hopeful to see what we can continue to do and try to convince folks to get better incentives, as well as just continuing to grow and develop our community. I know that Washington State is great when it comes to documentaries. We get a lot of those that come here. For myself, in the last 2 years, I've been seeing more and more commercial content that's been coming to Washington State that's on that larger scale. So we're definitely making an impact. People are falling in love with our state and our locations. So we just need to make sure that we have the crew that are knowledgeable and understand how to do productions at that level, and that are just available to do it. The shoot I did last week with Dove, we were stuck because everybody here in town was booked that day. So trying to find crew to book these folks last minute was a bit of a challenge. And those are wonderful things. It's wonderful to see the community be busy and have lots of work.
There also have been local initiatives, definitely down in Seattle. Like there was the King County Creative. I can't remember what the last part was. It was just the King County Creative Initiative, or what was it called?
Oh, I can't remember.
It was an entire, locally funded, like system of grants to basically finance productions throughout that area. So there has been some effort, but you're right. Like we do need to see way more of it if we want to see if we want those tax incentives and those production incentives for for the larger productions to come here. We're going to need to see a
Right.
bigger effort from the state.
And we have those incentives that people can apply for that are local, but the issue is that the moment we get one big TV show or one or two big movies, all of that incentive money is gone.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that when that does happen, because we had Z Nation was here for a couple years, and they took up most of those funds every year. And that was a great opportunity for us to lobby for more funds and try to continue to grow that. Now they're not here anymore, so it makes it a little bit more of a challenge.
Or an opportunity.
Staying positive.
Yeah, definitely. So Josh, doing Script Studio, you've
Yes.
spent a lot of time reading scripts
Yes.
and giving feedback on them. So I feel like you would probably have some good advice for aspiring screenwriters on their screenplays, and also the next hurdle after you write the thing, actually trying to make it a reality.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just think the general rule, writers write, there's a lot of truth to that. I also think that writers spend a lot more time reading than most people acknowledge. Having a general familiarity with kind of some of the fundamentals of narrative, whether that comes down to like really understanding like structure, or even just like pure definitions of what is story, what is premise, what is plot. I think that helps a lot. I think a lot of the kind of like a lot of new writers tend to focus heavily on premise and plot, and they miss the most important aspect, which is story. And that's the only thing that's going to really, keep someone interested from start to finish, and then also want to come back to that material. So my general guidance is just to spend more time kind of immersing yourself in other people's work, but also find the time to do the work yourself. So a lot of rewriting, a lot of kind of separating yourself emotionally from the work so that you can actually receive criticism. Writing is also a lot of pre-writing. I know these are all cliches and phrases, but I think there's a lot of truth. It's a lot harder than just sitting down and spitting out 15 or 96 or 120 pages. But at the same time, once you kind of start getting those basic practices in place, it kind of has its own flow and methodology. So, but I think I ultimately just want to encourage people to write and to keep writing and to share their stuff so that they can improve. In terms of putting it into production, I mean, that's always going to be a question of scale and resources, right? If we're talking about a feature, I mean, you better have rich parents, or know someone in the industry. I think in 2019 it was like 57 scripts were sold on spec, 57 features. It's really hard to break in as a screenwriter, and if you're doing it yourself, I think the real key is to do the work and make sure that this is something that's really solid before it goes into production. So does that sort of, I mean, I kind of dodged the going about and making it, because the answer is you make it yourself.
Yeah.
I think I would piggyback that is, once you feel like you have a script that's ready for production, you should come to one of our mixers, get a chance to meet other filmmakers. You might find a producer there that's interested. You might find a DP. Start building that network of folks that you can reach out to that might be willing to help out. And all of those things can add to you getting funded. Having the right crew attached, having the right talent attached, knowing the location that you're going to be shooting in, what all those details are, can go a long way.
Yeah.
Some things that we've done in the past is if you have a feature that you want to do, sometimes you might want to write something much shorter that would be not quite a trailer, but a sample of what type of production you guys can accomplish. One thing that we did was a short called Neverland, and it was a short film. And I think within 2 or 3 years of doing that, we were able to secure funding for a feature film that is going to be released soon. So, you know, there's a million different ways you can go about it. You just need to find out what's the best fit for your project and your resources.
It's a major funding strategy to basically create a short film that might serve as, like, you know, the first act, or at least up until the inciting incident of a film. And that tends to be hit or miss, but I think it's not a bad practice to be writing and to be thinking in those terms and to be out there making something. But yeah, I mean, it's hard, you know, as a thought experiment. Occasionally I'll like plug away at a budget, you know, and plot out like, what would $100,000 get me? And it's basically still $100,000 is not paying people like very much at all, and hoping, you know, that you're getting a lot of free resources along the way. So
yeah, well, going along with that, do you have any advice for trying to manage a set in a professional way, and, you know, just on a low budget and on such a small scale that most student filmmakers are working with, still trying to maintain that level of professionalism?
feed people.
Yeah,
Let
that's a
them,
good one.
yeah, I mean, I think a happy crew, you know, I mean, when they're giving you time, you need to be able to make it as pleasant and comfortable for them as possible. But you also need to reciprocate it. And certainly for student films, I think a big part of that is being willing and able to take on any role to help out another production.
You
But
also need to do the work.
yeah,
Everybody makes comments about fix it in post. I'm always a person that says fix it in pre-production so you don't have any issues during production or post.
yeah,
So put the work in so you have a solid plan ahead of time. And if you feel like you aren't very experienced on set, try to get an AD that either has more experience from you, or if that's all that your budget allows, hire that person, because that person is going to make sure that you get everything that you need to get, that you're safe in the way that you're doing it. So it's important to make sure that you have key roles filled by people who know what they're doing.
yeah. Everyone wants to be the director, you know. I shouldn't say that's not true at all. I don't want to be a director. I don't think Avielle wants to. Which is, I think, how we ended up being producers. But I think, you know, the notion that you're just going to start at the top just because that's where your passion is, or that's where your interest is, or worse, that's where your ego is. I think that will do you a disservice. I think you should let that drive keep you engaged and keep you learning, but you should be humble about it. You should really put in the work, put in the hours, really learn by being there. Yeah, I mean, YouTube videos are only going to teach you so much. So
Absolutely.
My first semester of film school, we shot black and white, like 8mm, and we cut it on like a flat top, like thap thap zoop tape. Like it.
Are you hating yourself right now?
I know, it's true, but it was like one of the best experiences ever. Especially because like my film got jammed in the projector, and it was that like, oh my gosh, the light is melting my film. But like that stuff you only get, you know, you don't get anymore. Everything's digital. But my point is with this is like being on set matters, and being, you know, through all of that matters. And the more time that you spend on set, the better you will be for it. So
Absolutely.
And join our script to screen program so that you can
I
you
do
can get those skills.
I was probably I probably should have asked you this at the beginning, but could you each talk a little bit more about just what your role is at Bellingham Film and what you do there?
Yeah. So I'm the founder. So I started Bellingham Film. As far as what I do there, I just sort of keep the train moving. When the community has a need, I will generally be the first point of contact for that to try and work with them to figure out what that need is and what that approach might be. And then I will take it to our team and we can discuss how we can sort of fill that void and what we can do to help support the community. I also do a lot of liaison work with Washington Filmworks. We've had discussions with the city about creating film programs. So I think I kind of work on the back end, creating those types of opportunities for us, as well as being that first point of contact for new filmmakers that move into our area.
Yeah, I mean, my primary role is to run these programs, whether it be script to screen or the script studio. I don't run all of them. Bellingham Film is bigger than just the two of us, and we have a lot of people who volunteer their time or make themselves available. But I try to be as engaged with these various programs as much as I can. And then, of course, we would be remiss not to mention Lorraine Wild and, you know, her efforts to just do everything to promote film making in this community are just, I mean, that has been a lot of the lifeblood of, or at least that's been most of the activity that Bellingham Film has had this past year is due to Lorraine and her efforts.
Absolutely. She runs all of our PR. She does all of our social media stuff. And she's just a huge resource. Since I've had my daughter, I've had to take a bit of a step back I'm not as in the know about everything that's happening in the film community, and Lorraine has been a great resource. She's been keeping up to date. She's communicating with filmmakers, making sure that she gets a chance to see the type of content they're producing and share that with the community. So I don't think Bellingham Film would be where it is today without the support of Lorraine and her being able to just share us with the world.
Yeah, she's doing a lot of stuff right now, like still doing, like, what is it, Film of the Week, and promoting, you know, what's going on at a local level. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Well, honestly, I feel pretty good about what we got. So if y'all are ready to finish up, I think we got everything.
All right.
I think the only thing that I do want to just mention is that in the last year or so, Bellingham has had a great opportunity where Northwest Grip has now moved north of Seattle. So now they're just south of us. So they're a great resource if you need any gear. We also have Bellingham Grip that started recently, and they've got gear as well as equipment that folks can rent. And then I believe we have another fellow that moved into town that has a grip truck that's available. So that used to be one of the biggest weaknesses that we had in our community, is that whenever you would need gear, you'd have to piece it together with all the folks that you know that have stuff. But now we've actually got a couple options on where you can get gear for your productions that might need lights or rails or all kinds of other gear. So just something to keep in mind. We're still growing.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I hadn't heard about that until right now. Yeah, also if we'll put a link to your website in the, video description, and if there's anything else you guys think of that you want me to put down there to promo, I can add that. Y'all can just email me. But thank you very much for talking to me today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Raven,
for inviting us.
Yeah, it was great to talk to y'all. I will stop recording now.